Okay, hello. Welcome to our webinar, Amendments Regarding Outsourcing Legal Considerations. I am glad to have you present at this webinar on a topic not only complex, but also controversial, that has raised several questions and doubts for business persons at all levels. Firstly, let me introduce ourselves. I am Enrique Marcos, partner in the Chihuahua office of our firm, and I will be coordinating this event today. For those who have a first approach with us, our firm, Ese Rubio, for its name in Spanish, is the result of an ongoing effort for more than half a century of many attorneys. On this year 21, we proudly celebrate our 50-year anniversary, being grateful to our clients and friends who have walked with us during this journey. We are a Mexican firm of integrated legal assistance, specialized in international and national transactions in the industrial sector and for all kinds of foreign investments. I invite you to visit our webpage to learn about our practice areas and the profiles of our specialized attorneys. Ese Rubio, with 6 offices distributed in the most important industrial regions of our country and integrating more than 90 attorneys, including 35 partners, we are one of the 10 leading legal firms in Mexico. Our clients range from medium-sized national entrepreneurs and up to Fortune 500 companies. Today, some of our partners specialize on topics to be addressed, form a team to present in an accurate way the issues and the relevant requirements of the outsourcing amendments in those elements that you should know as an investor in Mexico. Our presentation is divided in 4 parts. First, we'll be addressing labor matters. Then we turn to tax and social security. And third, we will address corporate issues. At the end, in the 4th stage, we would like to have, as usual, questions and comments time. We could use the chat of this tool, or at the end we will be presenting an email to start in contact and answer all your questions, okay? And with no further comments, I would like to address the word to our partner, Mr. Javier Canseco, who is a partner in our Querétaro office, to start on labor. Go ahead, Javier. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Diana, if you can help me with the presentation and move to the next one. What is happening right now with the outsourcing or subcontracting in Mexico? We have an amendment that entered on place on April 24th, including three main aspects: labor, social security, and tax. What we have in the labor, the main points are the outsourcing prohibition. It means the companies are not allowed to subcontracting personnel under most circumstances. We have 2 kinds of subcontracting issue. The one is the internal one, and the other with external companies. The internal one, we name it insourcing, because normally we create a corporate structure in which we create 2 companies. One that we name it service companies, and the other that we name the operating company. The only function of this corporate structure is to control the profit sharing that is paid every day, every year to the employees of the company, because we do not want to have a gap between the good years and the bad years. Now this figure is prohibited. The other one is the outsourcing. It means the relation that we have with the companies from outside of the group that provide us several services or works, specialized works or whatever. Also, that figure is prohibited. So right now, what the only exception in the insourcing is the shared services companies. It means a company in the same group who provides services to two or more companies of the same group. What we have now, if we are this prohibition, what we have now? We have the new area, as we call, it means now you can hire specialized companies who provide you specialized services or specialized works, different from the main activity of the hiring company. It means the hiring company is going to focus in the core business and is going to be able to hire other companies to perform specialized services or works. These companies must obtain his registration before the Federal Ministry of Labor. We are going to have a 3-month period in order to transfer the employees from the insourcing or outsourcing companies to the operating companies. We are going to make this transfer of personnel through a figure named employer substitution figure. It means we are going to transfer the personnel from the insourcing or outsourcing company to the operational company with the same labor conditions that the employee has. It means same position, same salary, same benefits, and recognizing the seniority. This frame period is going to be just applying for the next 90 days. Ending the 90 days, we are going to be losing this opportunity to transfer the personnel from one company to another through the substitution employer procedure. What is going to happen also? That we are going to have a jointly liability in case of non-compliance if the company hire the services of a third companies between the hiring company and the other companies. That is important because many companies in Mexico were not complying with the tax and social security obligations, creating a tax and social security problem. And in this case, if the third company do not comply with it, the hiring company is going to be jointly liability in these cases. What about the profit sharing? As you know, in Mexico, we have the figure of profit sharing in which the company must to pay a part of his profits or distribute part of the profits with the employees. The profit sharing rules are going to be exactly the same. We don't have a change on it. What we are going to have as a new rule is that the profit sharing is going to have a limit of or cap of 3 months of salary of the employee. Depending on how much the salary of the employee is, the cap is going to be 3 months of salary. The PTU, because we name it in Mexico, the profit sharing is known in Mexico as PTU, has this cap or the PTU that the employee received during the last 3 years. The company must do both calculations and pay the employee the most favorable to him or to them. It means if the 3 months of salary is higher than the average of the pay of the PTU of the last 3 years, we are going to have the payment of the PTU. But if the payment of the average of the past 3 years is higher, we are going to follow that payment or that rule. New sanctions and penalties are in this regulation in case of not compliance with it. Also, and my partners are going to explain it clearly, the taxes are going to be not deductible and the value added will not to be credited. We are working actually with several companies in all regions of Mexico, and what we are focusing and how we are working with them. The first step is necessary to assess the current situation of the company and establish a plan. We are making a review of 360 degrees in order to cover all aspects of this amendment, including the corporate structure of the company, the main economic activity of our companies and limited it, the external services providers or contractors, making transition plan including labor, social security, tax, corporate, and contracts. We also need to prepare an insourcing transition plan because we are going to move the employees from one company to another, and we must inform the union in case that we have a union, the employees in order to avoid a problem with them or create a bad labor atmosphere in the company. We must identify the external companies that provide services to the company or contractors. Which ones? Let me say personal, cafeteria, cleaning, surveillance, medical, etc. All kind of external companies who provide a service or perform a work for the company. We are going to request a contractor or external service companies the proof that they are complying with the law. They must to present the documents that they has been registered in front of the labor authorities and they are compliant with these new legal provisions. And of course, we need to prepare and sign new contracts, commercial contracts with all contractors complying with these new legal provisions. I think this is a general overview of the labor aspects of this new amendment, and I appreciate your time. Thank you, Enrique.
Thank you, Javier. Then we continue now with tax and social security matters, starting with Mr. Arturo Bañuelos, partner in our Mexico City office, with topics on tax. Arturo, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Enrique. Thank you to everyone who decided to join this webinar where we intend to convey the most important aspects of the labor and tax, social security, in general, the outsourcing reform. After that clear and concise explanation from Javier on the labor aspects, I'd like to go quickly to the origin of this reform, where we were told it was mainly to protect workers' rights. But also, the intention here is to combat certain schemes that the authority detected, which were abusive, elusive, sometimes evasive, where certain outsourcing companies were using methods that were unorthodox, to say the least, to try to lower their tax and social security burden. So Congress considers that it's not enough to have these consequences and penalties from a labor perspective. So they use other tools. Of course, as always, they use taxation as a tool in order to try to achieve their purpose. So first thing we see is Article 15D of the Federal Tax Code, where we can now see that taxpayers are not going to be able to deduct for income tax purposes and credit for VAT purposes payments made for outsourcing of personnel that carry out activities related to the main economic activity and to the corporate purpose of the taxpayer. So we have several concepts here. The first of them being outsourcing of personnel. The tax laws do not define what outsourcing of personnel is, but as Javier mentioned a little while ago, the labor law does define it as one person putting at the disposition or providing workers for the benefit of another. So that is the first thing that we have to consider. In order to be within the framework of this provision, there has to be personnel provided or put at the disposition of another. And if we're there, then we have to look at the other aspects, which are first, main economic activity. It's related to my main economic activity, understood as, in terms of the regulations to the code, the activity that generates the most income for a taxpayer in a given year. Also, does this mean that if I have other activities, I don't have to worry about this new provision? No, because those activities are certainly going to be tied one way or another to your corporate purpose, as written in your bylaws. And on the corporate purpose part, we've heard of several entities or companies that are intending to reduce substantially the corporate purpose in order to be able to deduct as specialized services or continue to deduct outsourcing services as specialized. But those of us who tend to tax audit and are litigating before the tax court every day know that the tax authorities very often decide to reject deductions precisely because they are not related to your corporate purpose. So we have to be careful here in making modifications to that corporate purpose, that in trying to solve one problem, we don't get into another. So it has to be a delicate balance. What I want to convey here is that, as Javier said, we have to have a 360-degree vision in implementing this reform. Here, we believe that what we're exposing or what we're explaining in this webinar, it has to do with mainly everybody that's attending, I believe. But we also know that there are taxpayers, companies that because of the particularities of their corporate purpose, they have to make a much deeper analysis of what to do in order to comply with this reform. And in that sense, I do have to mention that at our firm, we have many different practice areas, from mining law to ports to energy law to administrative law in general. And of course, a special mention to our multi-awarded foreign trade law practice, which is very important to many of our clients that are involved in import and export. And I should mention here to our IMEX manufacturing clients and attendants, it's possible that in implementing this reform, you're going to have to file notices to conserve your VAT certification and to conserve your EMEX program, which we can certainly help you with. And after that commercial break, let me go back to what I was asked to talk about here. Number one, I do want to address a specific topic that was put into the tax code, where if a person received outsourcing services and those workers were at one point in time workers of the person receiving the service, you're not going to be able to give a tax effect to that transaction. So if in any point in history, you had workers and they are now part of another company that it's rendering services to you, no tax effects are going to be applicable, and regardless of whether they qualify as specialized or not. So what is deductible? Well, basically specialized services and works that were explained by Javier, which mainly means that the activities to be performed are not related to my corporate purpose or main economic activity. That is what I'm going to be able to deduct. Also, very quickly, shared services within the corporate group, we can deduct that as specialized services as long as they do qualify as specialized. Now, there are other consequences in the law, and I'll go a little quicker because I know I'm running out of time. But for instance, if you incurring conducts that go against what I just explained, then that's going to be considered as an aggravating factor that'll imply that the penalty that's applicable is going to be raised. Also, we are going to be jointly liable, the person receiving the outsourcing, the specialized outsourcing services, with concerning the taxes applicable to the workers. Now, probably the most worrisome of all consequences is the one that's related to tax fraud, because in this case, what the law now says is that it will be, in the case of tax fraud and comparable conducts, it will be considered that they are qualified in the case of specialized services and works that are considered as simulated, right? Or if you simply hire outsourcing services that are now prohibited. So this is really important because if we go above a certain threshold in the alleged tax fraud, which is around 9 million pesos, then this will be considered in terms of as a serious crime in terms of the National Code of Criminal Proceedings. And I'm certainly not a criminal attorney, but I do know that what this means is that there would be officious preventive prison. What does this mean? That even though we might have arguments and we can certainly take it to litigation, in the meantime, while we do that, even if we win the litigation in the end, but somebody's going to be in prison, or probably more than one person. So we have to be very careful with this, because we know that many companies are going to want to conserve their outsourcing structures. But if the tax authorities consider that what we're establishing as a specialized service is being simulated, then we can certainly get into a lot of trouble from a criminal tax perspective. So I'll just mention the final 2 points that I wanted to mention. First of all, we're going to have to gather information from the person rendering the specialized services that shows us that they're complying with their tax and Social Security obligations, which is something that we were doing since last year because it was already in the law. And finally, that 6% value-added tax withholding that came into force in 2020 disappears as of August 1st, as all the tax provisions of this reform. They will come into force on August 1st. Thank you, Enrique. That's my part.
Okay, thank you, Arturo. We go now with Mr. Felipe Mendoza. Felipe is a partner in our office in the Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua city, and will be addressing Social Security issues. Felipe, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you, Enrique. There are some important changes on the Social Security law that regulates the subcontracting services. The first one is that the law establishes a general and zero liability of the company that receives the specialized services from the recorded suppliers. And it is important because in the previous law, this liability was secondary. That means that under the previous law, the Social Security had to try to claim first to collect the Social Security contributions to the service provider. If the Social Security was not able to collect from that company, then it could sue the beneficiary of those services. That is no longer the case. Now the Social Security, if the service supplier is not complying with the Social Security quotas, then it could go and try to collect against the recipient company of those services. There is also the obligation to inform to the Social Security and the Housing Fund Institute, which we call Infonavit, about all the contracts that the specialized services providers enter into in the previous quarter. This obligation has to be complied. If it is not complied, then the service provider will be subject to fines that ranges between $45,000 to $180,000 per each contract that they don't inform. So this is a major change, because previously there was not this type of fines imposed in the Social Security law. Other change that took effect is that since the subcontracting services are now prohibited, the ones that are not specialized, the previous service providers have the right to have a different classification in the Social Security, a risk factor different from for every of their customers. For example, if one of my customers manufacture electronic motors, then I will have a risk factor specific for that type of service. If I had another contract where I manufacture automotive parts, then I will have another type of risk factor. That is repealed, and now the subcontractors must have just a single class of risk factor. There is also this is important, the restructuring of subcontracting operations, that the Social Security give us a 90-day grace period to restructure of operations where in those companies that were under the scheme of insourcing services or outsourcing services to receive labor that was inherent to the economic business activity of the company. So we have this very limited time, 90 days, and 20 has already passed by, wherein we must absorb those employees for contractors, and we have to acknowledge their seniority and their labor rights. And if we do that, then there is an exemption of the obligation to transfer assets from the supplier to the operating company. So basically, we have to carry out this restructure before July 24th. There is also a simplified substitution procedure under the Social Security law to absorb the employees from the insourcing companies. That procedure is simplified and now can be done online. The company must record itself before the Social Security. It was not recorded before. It must file a letter describing the employment substitution, and it must attach to that application the notice that is given to the employees wherein their seniority and labor rights are recognized. And finally, the company must submit a format wherein it informs the Social Security of what type of activities they carry out. For example, the equipment that is used in the operations, the labor that is needed, the production process, so the Social Security can classify and provide a risk factor for that specific company. Finally, there is also a procedure to absorb the employees from the outsourcing model. If there are companies that have, 100 employees contracted during their peak productions, and usually they did it by contracting through this type of outsourcing companies. The Social Security establishes a procedure to absorb these customers, and if I have employees from 2 or 3 different suppliers, then I have to add the risk premiums of all of them, along with the premium of the recipient company, of the operating company, and multiply that by the by the salaries of all the employees, and then carry out an average of that, and that will be precisely the risk factor premium that I will apply after the employment substitution. This is a benefit because usually if you start operating you start an operation with the Social Security, you have to go and classify yourself in the average risk premium, which is higher. Usually it's a very high premium. So the operating companies or outsourcing companies, most likely that average is reduced by the elapsing of the time if they don't have risk or work accidents. So it's a benefit, and the operating company could receive a better risk premium instead of starting over again and record it itself by the first time with the Social Security. That's all on the Social Security matters. Good luck with you, Enrique.
Okay, Felipe. Thank you very much for your time. Now we move to corporate matters. Mr. Alejandro Montes, who is a partner in our Mexico City office, will be addressing all corporate considerations. Alejandro, please go ahead.
Thank you, Enrique, and thank you, everybody. Well, as my partners have already stressed, this reform was initially referred as a labor reform, but it has very relevant tax and social security elements. As my partners have already stressed also, it even has consequences that are not immediately evident, including on the corporate law perspective or from a commercial and business legal perspective. This labor reform is going to force all companies doing business in Mexico to review their internal structure and to review their business relationships and contracts, especially with service suppliers and clients, including our company's relationships and business relationships with other companies within the same corporate group. This review, as I think it's evident from the presentation of my partners, shall be multidisciplinary, as many elements of the labor reform, or this so-called labor reform, seem to clash with other legal provisions or other law branches, or may seem to confront or conflict with existing legal precedents and requirements or legal provisions in other areas. So I just want to make some remarks on some corporate law matters and some business or commerce law matters. From a corporate law perspective, and that's where the the internal review and restructuring analysis will depart. My partners have made reference to the corporate purpose of the company. As you may know, the corporate purpose is a provision in the bylaws of Mexican companies that describe what's the business activity or the main business purpose of the company. In Mexico, including for the tax reasons that Arturo explained, we don't have a general corporate purpose as you might have in other jurisdictions, just saying that the company is entitled or authorized to engage in any lawful business activity. In Mexico, the description of the corporate purpose provision in the bylaws tends to be, or has to be, more descriptive, provided that we also always want to be broad enough and general enough to allow the company to engage in several activities and to avoid conflicts and problems when it comes to deduct expenses, investments, and also when it comes to be able to do transactions and business with other parties. Unfortunately, this labor reform does not, maybe was not well thoroughly think in this perspective, and this is something that the companies will need to review, and this is something that the companies will need to analyze immediately. Another concept that my partners mentioned was the main corporate purpose or the main business activity, and that's a reference that we have, or that's a concept that we usually refer when it comes to labor matters and to compliance matters as to what is the purpose or the business activity or the main source of income of our company as we have it declared in our tax register, and how we declared or what we declare to the tax authorities. That's going to be our main corporate purpose. That's Arturo also explained how relevant that is to deductions, and that's also very relevant when it comes to being able to do business transactions with other companies. We also need to review that. From a business perspective or a commercial perspective, it's evident that we need to review all our service relationships with our suppliers and with our clients. That's gonna take a lot of work to our internal business areas and also to our compliance areas. So if we are contracting services from a supplier, our business areas and our compliance areas, we need to make sure that we are authorized to contract such services from that service supplier, because internally or from the perspective of our company, those are deemed our specialized services that we can contract, and also because we need to make sure that the supplier is complying with all the requirements that we needed or that we need him to comply in order for us to be able to contract him. And we need to make sure that we are complying with all the labor aspects of this reform, but at the same time that we are going to be able to deduct these costs and expenses on the tax side. So that's going to be something we need to work on. When we are the service suppliers for our clients and we do not want to go out of business, we need to make sure that we are in compliance with all this reform and that we will allow our clients to continue be able to contract us. And that we don't want to get them into trouble by not being a compliant service supplier. We do not want to get into trouble, and we don't want them to stop being able to contract us. So we need to work there also. When we have a large corporate group that necessarily, because of reality and practice, has business relationship between their companies, we need to make sure that those business relationships are compliant. And the service that one of our company is providing to another company can be supplied to that company or contracted by the other company. So we also need to make a huge review there. And we're already seeing that many companies will have to make huge internal restructuring just for purposes of getting in compliance within their internal business relationships. And finally, we also need to take into consideration, and I was saying that some of these reforms clash with other legal concepts and other legal areas, and initially, and in the end, this labor reform also clashes with reality, because there are several contracts and there are several business transactions that imply a rendering or the supply of services, but that cannot be interpreted, or that should not be interpreted as a subcontracting for these purposes. And we can think about very typical and everyday transactions as professional service providing, as commissions, as agencies, as brokerage contracts, where there's maybe a provision of services and where the authorities have sometimes interpreted that there is a provision of services, but that cannot be interpreted as an outsourcing or as a personal subcontracting. However, we need to make sure that we have everything straight, everything clear, and that we are able to support appropriate interpretation in that regard. And we need to review that our contracts are not getting into trouble, are not getting us into trouble, or cannot be misinterpreted when we have these very clear transactions, business transactions that should not be interpreted as subcontracting for these purposes. And finally, there are many cases in reality where not being able to subcontract third parties is just impossible, and where the definition of the corporate purpose and of the main economic activity of a company, and the form and just the title of the contracts that we need to enter into with suppliers will need to be reviewed thoroughly and legally supported. And maybe a good example, or a very simple example, is a construction contract where a company is contracted to deliver a turnkey project, let's say for the construction of an airport. That company will necessarily need to subcontract many of the services. It will need to subcontract design, drawings, engineering, analysis, and studies. It will need to subcontract many suppliers for many of the smaller portions of the construction process that a single company cannot perform by its own. But I mean, one could just by reading this reform, one could interpret that company is not allowed to subcontract any of these services. So this is something we need to start working on, as my partners have said. I just want to remark that the analysis has to be quite holistic and multidisciplinary, and that we are at your service, and that we will be very happy to work with you in this project and these processes. Thank you, Enrique.
Okay, Alejandro, thank you very much for your presentation. And now we could open to certain comments and doubts. We still have time, not much, but we have time, so I will go directly. And we have two questions, and I believe could be addressed by Mr. Canseco, by Javier. Javier, we have two questions regarding profit sharing and the treatment of same for the employees. If you could please give us an insight a little bit more on the profit sharing, we appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. We have two questions regarding the PTU. It means the profit sharing payment. The first one is, what happened with the temporary employees? Are they entitled to receive profit sharing or not? And we have that the temporary employees are entitled to receive the PTU if they worked more than 60 days during that year. It means just for the temporary employees, in order to receive the PTU, they must to be worked more than 60 days during that year. Also, what happened with the cap of the PTU? The company must to pay 3 months of salary as PTU to all employees, and the answer is no. The 3 months of salary is just a cap. It means if the PTU is paid according with the profits of the company. If the company does not have profits, then they are not going to pay a PTU because don't exist. Or if the PTU, of the PTU is less, the profits are less than 3 months of salary, what is going to happen? They are going to distribute or pay the profit according with the PTU according with the profits of the company. If it is less than the 3 months, they are going to pay less than the 3 months. Okay, the 3 months is just a cap if the company has to distribute or pay more than 3 months of salary. The other one is what happened with the salary employees. Are they going to receive the PTU according with the salary? And the answer is no. The PTU rules are very clear that the salary employees are going to receive a PTU, but they are receiving a greater than of the unionized worker with the highest wage within the company, or in absence of that, of the worker of the company with the same characteristics. It means if we have a union, the salary of the unionized employees with the higher salary. If we don't have a union, the position of hourly people with the highest salary plus 20%, that will be the cap. It means the salary of the employee with the hourly employee with the higher salary plus 20%. This is the cap for the salary employees. Thank you very much, Enrique.
Okay, Javier, thank you. Now we have another question that might be for Alejandro, or just let me know regarding a social consequence of this reform and the consequence of employment. Now, Alejandro, if you like to address this question.
Yes, of course. I cannot read the question, but if you could read it to me, I will try to answer.
I'm sorry. No. The question refers to the consequence of the amendments that we have. Will have a negative impact on employment because of all those employees that will not be or might not be hired due to outsourcing. What do you think? What would you be expecting? That's our question.
Well, Mexico had a huge outsourcing industry, and of course that's going to be affected. But there are also many companies which are not in the outsourcing industry that are already seeing that they will be affected, or that they won't be able to do business the way they were doing business. And the construction example I just referred is one of them. There's a huge concern there. But there are also concerns on companies that provided services, very complex services or very complicated services to their clients, and that they necessarily rely on outsourcing because of seasonal matters or maybe very specialized matters. Maybe they were subcontracting personnel because the season required. Or because they didn't have all the ability to hire these employees on their own, because they were needed at a different site, at another state, at a different city. And if they cannot continue doing business that way, they're going to suffer a lot. Their business are going to suffer a lot. And they need to work a lot on this. And I think that these are consequences that were not foreseen by our lawmakers. And we also have many clients that see that this PTU issue that Javier has been explaining is going to have a huge impact on their business policies. I have many questions of clients telling me, well, I don't have a problem paying PTU or paying large amounts of PTU, but in my corporate group, in my international corporate group, it's very difficult to explain to the CEO that someone in Mexico, anybody in Mexico, is going to receive a higher yearly salary than him. I mean, it's not that we don't want to pay it. It's just that it creates a disruption in our business. So there are many elements to. Of course, this is gonna affect many persons and many companies, and it's gonna hurt the employees in Mexico as well, I think, unfortunately.
Okay, Alejandro. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Alejandro. I was saying thank you very much for your time and your question. Then we still have some time. There is a question that might be addressed by Javier or by Felipe. It is regarding the same company with different branches, and having specialized services in one branch or one branches, and not having those specialized services or insourcing services in other branches. Who would you like to have this question, Felipe or Javier? How do you feel?
I can take it.
All right. Thanks.
Well, basically, this is there is not a magical solution. We basically need to review case by case, basically. So in this question, we will have to answer this question, we will have to review the agreements that this company has with its suppliers, and obviously the bylaws, and determine what is the economic business activity, the primary business activity of the recipient company. Once we do this analysis, then we can determine on whether or not this type of subcontracting services fall within the definition of specialized services under the law, or just determine that this is a prohibited practice. To determine whether or not this type of services will be valid under the law, an analysis of the contract must be made, an analysis of the activities of the supplier, an analysis of the activities of the recipient company, and of the bylaws of both companies. So, as mentioned, there's not a magical solution. It is a case-by-case basis. So that's why it is important to make this revision and start right now, because we have just 70 days period to carry out this analysis and restructure of operations. Thank you.
Okay, Felipe, thank you very much. We have another question, and I believe could be for Arturo. Arturo, what happens if an employee just worked for more months in the year, and they receive the proportional part of the 3 months of the PTU, something related also with the profit sharing? Could you please help us with that question?
Sure, Enrique. Probably more for Javier than for me, but I can tell you that usually, yes, it's going to be a proportional part of depending on how long the employee worked during the year. So if they only worked for 4 months during the year, then proportionally that's what they're entitled to in terms of PTU or profit sharing. That the rules, as I understand, and Javier can correct me if I'm wrong, as to how to calculate profit sharing didn't change much. The only difference is today there is a cap as to what can be received by the employees, which is 3 months, or the average of the last 3 years, whichever is higher. So, but I believe that there hasn't been a change as to the rules as in proportion to how long were you in the company. That's what you get proportionally in profit sharing.
Okay. Thank you, Arturo. We have another question related with the social consequence on these amendments, and it refers if this reform causes many employees to return to informality or leave their work leave their work based out of Social Security. That's interesting. I mean, who would you like to address this? As Felipe, would you like to address this because of Social Security? What would you expect? Or probably Javier? Who of you would like to see this question? I want you one at a time, okay?
No, I can do it.
Okay.
I don't think that the people is going to be leaving the work or the company is going to close the companies or whatever because they must to pay the Social Security. That's for me, it's out of mind. The companies must to comply with their obligations, paying the Social Security taxes, etc., complying with the legal rules, labor rules, etc. If the company can comply with that, of course they must to close that business. That's very, very simple. I don't understand the mind that we must to cheat in our obligations in order to have a profitable company. That's my personal opinion.
Yes, I would add that our clients, and we make sure of that, they are always legal compliant. So yes, this is not how they do business. They do business by being profit. I mean, they are profitable companies because they do business the right manner. And of course, not paying taxes and not paying Social Security is not the way to go for them.
Right. Enrique, if I may just I know we have like 5 minutes left, but there's a question that's being asked recurrently, and it concerns this new registry from the Ministry of Labor. And now, if it's a specialized service, companies that are going to render specialized services have to be registered. That's one of the fundamental requirements to be able to receive specialized services and give a tax effect and be in compliance with the outsourcing reform. So is it enough to have this registry to consider that the service is specialized? No, it is not. We have to be very careful with that, because the fact that this company was able to justify before the Ministry of Labor that they are specialized because they have training, because they've been doing this kind of service, whatever it is, for a long time, that's fine. You know, they are considered as specialized before the Ministry of Labor, but when they come to us and render a service, just showing that registry is not enough. We have to go case by case and determine whether that service is related to my main economic activity or corporate purpose. If it is, then it's not going to be considered as specialized for me, and I'm not going to be able to give a tax effect to that service, regardless of the fact that the person is registered before the Ministry of Labor as a specialized service provider. Okay, so I just wanted to address that, because even though it's not here, it is a question that we've received a lot.
Okay, Arturo, thank you very much. Well, I believe we are running out of time. I thank you to all of my partners for this time, and most important, I'd like to thank you, all of you, for your presence and time devoted to this webinar. We are open to answer any of your questions or doubts. Actually, we will be expecting and we will be glad to hear from you again. Please contact us. You could find all of our contact information in our webpage, and we will be, and as I always said to my clients, we will be glad to be of assistance and be part of your team to work in Mexico. Thank you very much. We come to an end. We wish you the best, and for the immediate time, have a great weekend and see you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.